Welcome back. Today we will be discussing my New Year's 6 and college football playoff matchup projections and predictions. Along with each team, I will have my personal ranking for them and my personal record prediction with them, which will help give you some perspective as to why I have them placed in New Year's 6 bowls and in some cases placed in the college football playoff. For college football playoff matchups, I will also have, alongside of my personal ranking and record prediction, my college football playoff ranking prediction, as this college football playoff committee does their rankings differently than mine. They have different criteria, obviously, and their rankings, especially the top four, are the ones that actually matter. So I find it right to list them. I'm going to spend a few minutes on these matchups, the New Year's 6 bowls and playoff matchups, specifically wanting to check out and talk about the playoff matchups the most. So we'll go through the New Year's 6 bowls first, then the playoff matchups, and I'll give predictions and how I think the matchups will fare in each bowl. If you're new to this channel, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click that notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video, and comment down also your New Year's 6 and college football playoff predictions. So let's get right into it. And first and foremost, we start with the Cotton Bowl. I think the Cotton Bowl will pit number 6, 11-1 BYU against number 8, 10-2, 7-2 in the Big 12, Oklahoma State. BYU is more of an offensive team. They return everyone on offense minus running back Tyler Algier, who went off to the NFL, and two of their great wide receivers. They return good wide receiver Puka Nacua and their entire defense and offensive line. So BYU is loaded with returning talent, loaded with veterans. They have experience. Kalani Sitake is a coach who over the previous 2 seasons has proven to do more with less. And it's a similar story with Mike Gundy, doing more with less. Oklahoma State was not a winning place before he came there, and he has 2 12-win seasons and several double-digit win seasons under his belt. Oklahoma State, unlike BYU, is a defensive team. You have Colin Oliver leading a powerful defensive line, and even though Jim Knowles, their amazing defensive coordinator, is now off to Ohio State, they bring in well-known and well-respected defensive coordinator Derek Mason, who left from Auburn. So it's pitting an offensive team against a defensive team. BYU does have much more returning production. Oklahoma State overall is the more talented team. BYU on talent metrics, total talent metrics, is actually outside of the top 100. At least it was last year, according to 24/7 Sports. Nonetheless, I think I favor BYU in this matchup of the Cotton Bowl, which is 99% sure is going to be the highest ranked group of 5 team, which I think will be BYU, against an at-large, highly ranked Power 5 team, that being Oklahoma State. I favor the veterancy, head coach Kalani Sitake and offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick and quarterback Jaron Hall over defensive coordinator Derek Mason and an Oklahoma State team that actually loses a fair amount from last year and where their offense, led by Spencer Sanders, has had its own plethora of struggles. Up next, we have the Orange Bowl. The Orange Bowl, I have number 10, 10-3, 7-2 in the Big Ten, Nebraska, taking on ACC champion, despite the losses of Jordan Addison and Kenny Pickett, number 14, 11-2, 6-2 in conference, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh will win the ACC via a 3-way tie in their division, and them having the best record and highest ranking, in my opinion, will yield them the bid in the ACC championship game, where I think they take down Clemson, who still has plenty of struggles on their offensive line, which matches up very badly with Habakkuk Baldonado and Pittsburgh's strong defensive line. This game is also interesting because it pits former Pittsburgh OC Mark Whipple, who's now the OC at Nebraska, against his former team. Nebraska is a team who, unlike a lot of these other New Year's 6 teams, there's not a lot of immediate pop-out strengths, a lot of X factors. They're not a proven team like most of these teams are. In fact, they haven't been to a bowl game since 2016. But they do have something that none of these teams do. They have the number 6, well, minus Alabama, but that's an exception. They bring in 15 transfers. They're the number 6 transfer portal class. They bring in Mark Whipple, Mickey Joseph, all on their offense. They have Eric Chinander, a very solid and underrated defensive coordinator. And everything seems to be aligning for Nebraska. And I think that Nebraska will win the West. They'll go 10-3, losing to Ohio State and Indy, losing to Michigan and Iowa in the regular season. Pittsburgh, I have losing to Miami and North Carolina. Oklahoma State, I have them losing to Baylor and Oklahoma. I forgot to mention that earlier. So this will be the lowest ranked matchup out of all the New Year's Six Bowls. It's an at-large team, more likely than not Big Ten, placed up against the ACC champion or the second highest ranked ACC team. Similar to the 2016 Orange Bowl, Florida State, next highest ranked ACC team versus Michigan, an at-large Big Ten selection. And I would like to lean Nebraska in this matchup, but this is a confusing one because their offensive line will not bode well against Pittsburgh's D-line. But with Jordan Addison leaving Pittsburgh and the ACC being much weaker than the Big Ten, I have a lot of questions surrounding Pittsburgh's offense. So I'm going to lean slightly Nebraska on this one, but I'm not really making any official predictions for these New Year's Six Bowls outside of the college football playoff. Like how I leaned BYU mainly because of their offense in the Cotton Bowl, I'm leaning Nebraska here, but Pittsburgh with their D-line could certainly make an argument to win this game. Up next, we have the Rose Bowl. Number 4 Michigan, 11-1, 8-1 in conference. If you watch my content, you know that this loss is to Ohio State, more likely than not. It's probably not to anyone else. And facing them will be number 23, 9-4, 7-2 in the Pac-12 USC. So the Rose Bowl is very interesting because it has very strict conference tie-ins unless it's a college football playoff game. So doing some research, I've discovered that if a Pac-12 team is ranked like very low, it doesn't matter. If the Pac-12 champion goes to the playoff, which I think they will, and I think that's Utah, it's the next highest ranked Pac-12 team, and that would have to be USC, who's ranked very low both in my list, and I think they will be ranked very low because of their 9-4, 7-2 record, which includes 2 losses to Utah, one in the regular season, one in the championship game, and a loss to UCLA and non-conference rival Notre Dame. But their 7-2 conference record, because I think the Pac-12 is weak, they'll beat each other up. The 7-2 conference record will be the second best in their now divisionless conference, and that will lead Lincoln Riley in his first year to reach the Pac-12 championship and as a result get a Rose Bowl berth, assuming Utah reaches the college football playoff. This matchup, USC, Michigan, I have both being more offensively focused teams. USC will have the better pass game with Caleb Williams, Mario Williams, and we cannot forget Jordan Addison as well. And Michigan will have that powerful run game. You have Oluwatimi, the center, leading a offensive line that I think will be the best in the nation. You have Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards in the backfield as well. And that really does create possibly the nation's best run offense. And Mario Williams, Jordan Addison, Caleb Williams, that's a really good QB wide receiver group. So this, I would say, is going to be more of a shootout than other New Year's Six Bowls. Both defenses, I think, will be better than some might like to believe. Michigan has a lot of depth and talent on defense. USC they've impressed me with bringing in portal additions on defense. They weren't doing that at first, but they brought in a nice linebacker from Arizona State. They have a very talented defensive line pass rusher in Corey Foreman, who might have a breakout year this season, and they've brought in a plethora of other players as well. I favor Michigan in this one quite heavily, at least compared to my other favorites in the other New Year's Six Bowls, just because of an 11-1 team facing off against a 9-4 team. Matchup-wise, neither team really has many direct matchup advantages against the other, besides Michigan just having more talent, being a more established team, and just having a more solid foundation, really. I favor Michigan here. Michigan, though, they have not won a New Year's Six Bowl under the Jim Harbaugh era, and they have not won a bowl game altogether since 2015. So maybe Lincoln Riley can sneak something out of here. And finally, we got the Sugar Bowl. Number 7, 11-2, Big 12 champion, 8-1 Oklahoma, taking on the third highest ranked SEC team, number 9, 10-2, 7-1 in conference, Arkansas. Oklahoma, I have losing to Nebraska on the road, and I have them losing to Kansas State in an upset fashion, which OU typically suffers from one of those a year. Arkansas, I have losing on the road to BYU and losing to Alabama. I have Georgia and Alabama both making the college football playoff again, which leaves the next highest ranked at-large SEC team in Arkansas to take on the Big 12 champion in Oklahoma. Oklahoma loses Caleb Williams, they lose Mario Williams, they lose a lot. They return wide receiver Marvin Mims. Their defense, they have Brent Venables coming in, Ted Roof is the DC, and such. Nick Bonito, though, leaves, along with a plethora of others that I just mentioned, not just on defense, but on offense. So Oklahoma has a lot of questions. If we were to include all of these teams and all these matchups, this matchup is probably the most speculative, just because both Arkansas and Oklahoma lose so much. But I have great faith in their coaching staffs. I think that having Jeff Lebby as the OC, along with Bill Biedenbaugh and Cale Gundy, makes one of the best offensive staffs in the nation. So Oklahoma's offense with Dylan Gabriel and Marvin Mims is going to be much better than anticipated. Their defense is going to, I wouldn't say it's going to fall off. It was already pretty meh under Lincoln Riley, and bringing in a defensive mind like Venables I think is going to help. And then with Arkansas, you have KJ Jefferson at quarterback. You're bringing in Drew Sanders, I think is his name, a linebacker from Alabama. Very highly rated guy. Had no problems at Alabama, just wanted some playing time. He'll anchor the defense. Arkansas does not have a lot of returning production, though. You have KJ Jefferson, but you lost Treylon Burks and others to the NFL draft and just to graduation. But I think Sam Pittman is going to reload at Arkansas, much like I think Brent Venables is going to inherit a great Oklahoma team and work his way into winning a Big 12 championship in his first year. In this matchup, I will favor Arkansas here to win, though. I feel like that SEC schedule is going to toughen them up. I feel like Arkansas is more established here, and I do think Arkansas has the more not only the more underrated, but the much superior quarterback, in my opinion. But this is another close matchup as well. And now that we're done with the New Year's Six Bowl games, we're on to the college football playoff matchups. So first and foremost, the Fiesta Bowl. It looks like the Fiesta Bowl is going to be the 1 versus 4, pardon me. I have Alabama being number 2, 13-0, 8-0 in conference, being the SEC champions. They will face back-to-back games, the SEC runner-ups in Georgia, 12-1, 8-0. And I have it only being this way. This would not happen if not for this circumstance, because I think there will be, which is, it's hard to believe, but I think it's what's going to happen. There's going to be 3 undefeated playoff participants, which happened in 2018. You had undefeated Notre Dame, undefeated Clemson, undefeated Alabama. It's possible. It hasn't happened in a while, but it's very possible. And I think it's going to happen here. And that's why I have Georgia falling to number 4, because they'll be the only team in the playoff with a loss, and that will hurt them. Nonetheless, though, it's going to be a great matchup. Georgia and Alabama this year, they both return a great deal on their offense. Alabama returns the majority of their offensive line. They return Bryce Young. Yes, they do lose Jameson Williams. They lose John Mechie. They lose Brian Robinson. They lose Evan Neal. But they're going to reload on offense. They have the depth. They're bringing in transfers like Tyler Harrell, Jermaine Burton, Tyler Steen, for example, they have a loaded transfer portal class. Alabama and Nebraska are the only teams on this list who have absolutely loaded transfer portal classes. And Alabama's is one that has very few players, but they're all highly ranked. And Alabama's defense, you can't forget you have Will Anderson, you have Jordan Battle, you have a plethora of others, you have the best staff, one of the best staffs, and you can't argue that they have the best head coach in the country in Nick Saban. So Alabama is going to be a fantastic team. I think that they're going to get revenge over Georgia, not just once, but twice here. So I think they'll go 2-0 versus Georgia in back-to-back weeks, which will be very challenging to do. But I think that Georgia being a team who they lost nearly their entire starting defense. They lost their entire starting defensive line. I think most of their starting linebacker core, and I think half of their starting secondary. Return Keely Ringo, maybe another guy, and it's really about it. And I think that Georgia being a mainly defensive-focused team, Alabama being a much more futuristic, offensive-based team who still has more talent, Nick Saban still, and you saw this last year when Alabama, who, if we're being honest, had no business being in the SEC championship game with Georgia just because of how both played at completely different levels throughout the regular season. And Alabama just came in and they spanked them and leveled them. Nick Saban still has a number on Kirby Smart's back. And I think that it's going to be shown this next season and in this matchup, both in the SEC championship game and here. But it's hard to beat a good team twice. And, Georgia defensively was able to dominate Alabama's O-line in the national title. Stetson Bennett has shown flashes of greatness, and I think he's an underrated quarterback. And you also have Brock Bowers, for example, who I think is the nation's best tight end. You have a national title level O-line who I think can rival Michigan's to be that number one O-line. So Georgia can totally be in the ballpark to win here. I think that Georgia can totally repeat as national champions. I think they have that potential. Just because I don't predict it to happen doesn't mean I think it isn't possible. There are multiple different outcomes for different teams, but at the end of the day, you have to pick the one that you think is the most likely, and that's what I think here. So I think that Alabama will beat Georgia. They'll move on to the national title game. They'll win the Fiesta Bowl. And the Peach Bowl, which looks to be the number 2 versus number 3 matchup, I have Ohio State being ranked number 1, 13-0, 9-0 in conference. I have Utah as my 5th best team. I think Michigan is the better team than them, but because of record and strength of schedule and the fact that Utah won their conference and Michigan didn't, that the committee is going to place Utah ahead of Michigan. And I think that's deserved. I think that Utah would deserve to go to the playoff instead of Michigan. I just think that Michigan's the better team for different reasons, mainly talent, the fact that Utah does have a weaker secondary, and it really does come down to star talent is really what it comes down to. But that's not to discredit Utah. I have Utah going 13-0 myself, 9-0 in the Pac-12. They will beat up and eat alive a very weak Pac-12 this season. I think that Ohio State, returning Jackson Smith-Njigba, Travion Henderson, returning C.J. Stroud, is going to be one of the best offenses in the country. I have them as the number 1 offense in the country. They'll have, I think, certainly the best passing game because Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr., you didn't see them a lot last year outside of the Rose Bowl. In at least the receiving end of things, Emeka Egbuka was returning punts and kicks all year round. But I think that passing game-wise, they're going to have an elite passing game. They'll also have an elite run game. They'll be known for the pass game, but you can't forget about Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams in that run game. Their defense under Jim Knowles should improve to a top 30, top 25 level. It has the ceiling to go even higher with guys like JT Tuimoloau, Zach Harrison, Jack Sawyer, Tommy Eichenberg, Steele Chambers. You also got Tanner McAllister from the transfer portal who came with Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State to Ohio State. Ohio State all around is a team that outside of the linebacker core, and I've said this in different videos, But even then, the linebacker core is still good. It's just an area that doesn't quite match up in elite talent and depth compared to other spots on the field. They have no real weaknesses, which is like the same thing with Alabama and Georgia and a lot of these other top 10 teams, which is why I have them here. But their offense is beyond most things that we have seen. It's beyond most offenses we've seen, especially in the passing game department. Their offensive line is going to improve as well with new head coach Justin Fry. And that linebacker core, which I mentioned earlier, is a weakness. Who knows? With Jim Knowles coaching it might not be the weakness on the defense. I could be totally wrong there. And with Utah, you have Kyle Whittingham, who is a coach who, once again, common theme, talent isn't everything here. Coaches who do more with less will get rewarded. Utah itself is also dipping its fingers in the transfer portal, picking up a linebacker from Florida. They had the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, Freshman Defensive Player of the Year more specifically, who returns as well. He was very good. His name escapes me at the moment, but he played on the defensive line, had several sacks and tackles. And on offense, you have Cameron Rising, Tevion Thomas. You have a very versatile, one of the best tight end rooms in the country. And Andy Ludwig is also one of the best offensive coordinators in the country. I think that this matchup favors Ohio State, mainly because, like I was making with the Michigan comparison earlier, just raw talent. Ohio State has a massive advantage in raw talent over Utah. Honestly, Utah is mainly a collection of lower-ranked 4 stars and 3 stars, and yes, coaching matters, and they can develop those guys to play better, but recruiting matters too. And like I was making with the comparison of Michigan earlier, who recruits better than Utah and would likely outlast Utah if they matched up multiple times, Ohio State just has so much more raw talent and much of a higher ceiling than Utah is. And you saw that in the Rose Bowl when Utah jumped out to this massive lead against an Ohio State team that was suffering from attrition, and it didn't matter. Ohio State just outlasted them, and by the fourth quarter, it was very apparent who the better team was, even if Utah played with more fire and closer to their ceiling. It's going to be a similar result in this Peach Bowl this year. It's going to be a game of attrition, which I think Ohio State will begin to pull away in the third or fourth quarter. And finally, the national championship. The national championship game, which I think will pit number 1 in my rankings, number 2 in the CFP, 14-0, 9-0 in conference Ohio State, against number 2 in my rankings, number 1 CFP, 14-0, 9-0, Alabama. The game that it'll be such a shootout, honestly, regardless of the fact that I think Alabama has the number 1 defense in the country. Both offenses outclass both defenses. It's a fact. I think that your 2 best QBs in the nation, in Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, are going to match up very well against the opposing secondaries. I think that Jermaine Burton, Tyler Harrell, they're not going to be as good as, let's say, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Marvin Harrison, or Emeka Egbuka, but they're going to be good, and Alabama's secondary is better than Ohio State's secondary. Though Ohio State's secondary is still one of the better secondaries in the nation with Denzel Burke and such. The matchups here are just beautiful. This game makes my mouth water just thinking about it. It is an amazing game. It is D-line versus O-line. Every matchup here matters. I mean, it's the national title game, but these teams are so similar, yet so different. Alabama just being more level-headed overall, having a number 1 defense, but an offense that, with a very deep running back room, with Trey Sanders, Jahmyr Gibbs, and still a solid passing game with the Heisman-winning QB, could also contend for the number 1 offense. But Ohio State obviously having the highest ceiling out of all the teams this year to have the number 1 offense, and a defense that can, I think, reach a top 10 level in year 1 with the talent they have. Ohio State being a team that isn't as level as Alabama, but they're great and elite in the area that matters the most in the modern game of college football, that being the offense. And I think certainly in that passing game and in the O-line department, you saw Will Anderson just destroy Alabama's tackles, which is going to happen in the spring game because Will Anderson's Will Anderson. But Alabama's O-line had problems last year, especially at the tackle position, and with how many times Will Anderson beat up them in the spring game, I think they have problems there again. So Ohio State, I think, has the better O-line here. They have the better wide receivers. And I think C.J. Stroud, honestly, is going to be the better quarterback this year. Running back rooms are pretty even, Steven. I think that Alabama has the better tight end room, but then you get to the defense, and outside of possibly defensive line, Alabama outmatches them at every position. At linebacker, you have Will Anderson, who is Alabama's best player there, so no questions. Ohio State couldn't compete there. And then at secondary, it would be more competitive. Cameron Brown, Denzel Burke, but Alabama's secondary is just well coached. They return most people who I care about. They have a guy named Kool-Aid McKinstry there, who that isn't just a cool name, but he's also an elite, fantastic player. And at D-line, GT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, but Alabama, they return most of their D-line as well. I think that in the end of the day, this can go either way. It's close to a 50-50 game. Nick Saban, I also forgot to mention the coaching advantage that Alabama has at head coach. I'd say the staffs, excluding the head coach, are pretty equal. It's kind of the old versus what could be a new dynasty. I think that Georgia has solidified themselves as potentially being a new dynasty, or more likely than not being a new dynasty. And I think this game will determine if Ohio State is at that position of being a team that can win a national title or multiple national titles, be the top tier of college football. Which, I mean, the top four is good, but Ohio State fans obviously want that top-notch position. I'm going with Ohio State here, but I can easily see Alabama winning this game with their solid defense, maybe capitalizing on quarterbacks occasionally make mistakes, and the fact that Ohio State probably won't face a defense like Alabama all year round. That's how good I think Alabama's defense is going to be. And likewise, Alabama's defense won't face an offense like Ohio State's all year. So I'm favoring Ohio State in this matchup, but Alabama very well could win this game also. And those right there are my New Year's 6 and college football playoff matchup projections and predictions. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, click that notification bell, and comment your thoughts on this video and on your own predictions and opinions down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.